Hello, my name is Pavell COF, and this is my claim of fact speech. So, Colorado native Monica Lutz was 18 years old and fresh out of high school. She had dreams of solving social and economic problems in third world countries. So, on advice of her parents, she took the year off and went to India to a remote city just to install like solar power in the remote city. After months of enduring this, she decided that that career line was not exactly her cup of tea, so she decided to go to college next year and search for different other career plans. On this, she said, if I hadn't gone on the gap year, I might have spent 4 years and $200,000 on tuition to end up in that same country and find out that same thing. Though the experience left her without a clue about her future and kind of confused as to what to do in that aspect, it was a positive experience because though it didn't point her in the right direction, it showed her she was going in the wrong direction. I believe every student would benefit from an experience like this. In fact, I'm of the opinion that students would have a more successful college experience if there was a required mandatory year off between high school and college. Now let me tell you what I mean when I mean more successful college experience. I mean that students would be more successful academically as well as successful in getting the most out of their college experience. Academic success can be measured in a variety of ways. A staple of academic achievement in college is whether or not that student exceeds expectations from coming out of high school. Let me clarify that for you a little bit. As part of admissions, college try to predict a student's future success in college by looking at what they did in high school. For instance, they look at your GPA, your SAT scores, and state tests, etc. And so they look at all that and they try to prescribe like what GPA you'll earn in college. Well, Robert Clagett, who is the former dean of admissions at Middlebury College, and also a well-known advocate of students taking gap years, he wrote an article for the New York Times in which he analyzed the statistics from Middlebury College and said this: students who take a gap year end up doing better than their non-gap classmates, even when controlling for the academic credentials the gap year students brought with them. On average, those students have shown a clear pattern of having higher GPAs than otherwise would have predicted. And this positive effect lasts all 4 years. I believe this is because gap year students are more prepared for college, therefore the transition is smoother. A group of psychologists in Australia share my theory and did a study for the Journal of Educational Psychology in which they analyzed 2,502 students and found that higher levels of motivation were directly linked to students who had taken a gap year before college. This is because being prepared for college is equivalent to having the motivation to push through college. So it's no wonder that students with higher motivation also had greater academic success. Which leads me to my second point. A mandatory gap year would allow students to get more out of their college experience. Consider students who are undecided on their major. Most undecided programs in schools are pointless, expensive years being overwhelmed by uninteresting general ed courses, after which they're expected to commit to some major of some sort. With a gap year, students have a full year undeterred by schoolwork to go out and focus on their passion and find out who they really are. In Carl Heigler and Ray Nelson's book, The Advantage of the Gap Year, they interviewed 280 gap year students in which 60% of them said that the gap year solidified their career and major choice. So in that gap year, they decided which course they wanted to go down. My second point is that it's no secret that the stress of paying for college is great on many students. I know for myself personally it is. The gap year can help this too. A full year off from schooling gives the student the opportunity to have a full year salary going into college. It also teaches them some financial responsibility. Also, there are exclusive scholarships available to gap year students, including the $2.5 million offered in scholarships by the American Gap Association every year. So I've just given you a bunch of reasons that show why the gap year is a great idea. But, for the most part, people are still opposed to this idea. Why? Well, taking a year off delays the time until a student can get their degree. It's true. Though yes, it technically does that, it also aids the student in developing their resume, which makes them look more attractive to employers once they get out of college. Another argument is that they won't come back after the gap year. On this, it depends on how you look at it, because for students who say that they're going to come back after their gap year, the retention rate isn't exactly high, but for students who are enrolled in programs with their universities that are guaranteed to come back the next year, there's a 90% retention rate within the first year and a 95% retention rate in the first 2 years. So as the numbers show, the gap year is beneficial. There are places in Europe that have already had a gap year in place for some time, and the numbers show that it works. More and more gap year programs are being implanted in universities across the nation, and I think as this idea gains more traction, come 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, it might be something established in our education system. Thank you.
All right, I think you've got a lot of things in the speech that work well, and let's talk about them first. The proposition is very clearly identified. I think you establish a good deal of credibility, largely because of the presentation that you're giving. You're smooth and fluent. You're usually talking to the audience. The language sounds confident. And even though I think a lot of the speech is prepared from a script, it's delivered from that script effectively, which enhances your credibility there. I also think you help your credibility a great deal by using a variety of sources that are authoritative on this, including people who have studied the concept of a gap year and some experiences that you cite. I do think some of the information there is a little bit thin. There's a good explanation of the points. The information that you present on the surface seems to be sound, but for instance, in that comparison on the whole issue of retention, that sounds like only a certain number of people who had a guaranteed return, you reach that 90-95% retention rate, but we don't know what percentage of people that was of the whole. So if they were assured of a spot, for instance, and there were 10 of them and 9 of them came back, that's fine. But there were 100 people in the program who took the gap year, and of the other 90, only 17 came back. That would seem to suggest that there's a disproportionate rate. I don't know what the numbers are there, and so, like I said, it sounds good on its face. I don't know how deep it is, and so a little bit more here and there could help. That's not a criticism of the evidence that you presented, it's just a suggestion about other things that could be added to the argument. I like the information that you presented. Like I said, I thought that added a lot of credibility to the presentation also. All right, so those are the good things. There are one or two things that I think you need to fix. First of all, there's not really a preview of what the supporting material is going to be, what the secondary claims are going to be, so I think that's a little bit problematic. It's especially problematic for the first point because I don't know what your first point is. You just start talking about the whole subject there. Then you've got a signpost that takes us to a second point, and I'm going, okay, well, I know what the second point is because he just said it, but I don't know really what the whole first point was. Then I got a little confused again because there's a second point when you're presenting it. And I assume that it's actually really a couple of points that you're presenting on that second supporting claim, but the way it's presented, it makes it sound like you're repeating a second point. And organizationally, I think that's a little bit problematic. And so the minor claims, the ones that come under the secondary claims, what you need to do there is make sure that you have very clear declarative statements for those points also, and then just kind of talk about them in order to begin with, next, something like that, as opposed to numbering them, which would be, like I said, creates the confusion between the numbering of the major points. You had a little bit more time. I didn't think that you were going too fast, but you do have enough time that I think that you could probably, like I said, back up some of the data a little bit more, although the information you presented seemed very sound to me. All right, thank you. Lauren is going to be our next speaker, please.